Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Built Different podcast. In studio with me, I have retired Sergeant Tom Lake. So I'm going to let him introduce himself.
Oh, great. Hi, everybody. I'm retired Sergeant Tom Lake. I worked for the St. Louis City Police Department for a little over 23 years. I retired after 19 and a half years. In November of 2016, I was shot twice in the face while on duty in my patrol car, stopped at a stoplight. And that is how I came to be.
Before we jump into all that, let's get a little background. So you start with the city.
Okay.
Actually,
let's go backwards. So in 1995, I joined the Reserve Academy out in St. Louis County for St. John's Police Department. And all the time I was as a reserve officer with them, I was on the city's eligibility list. I always knew I wanted to be a city policeman. Like the minute I came to St. Louis, I lived in Omaha for so many years, and it was really hard to get on up there. And I came back to St. Louis City to hopefully push that the way I could. And then while I was a reserve officer with them in August of 96, I got my letter from the city and I joined the police academy in 96. In 97, when I graduated, I was assigned to the 1st District. And then I went as a patrolman from the 1st to the 2nd to the 6th District. And then while in the 6th District...
This is the old
6th District. The old 6th District when there was nine districts.
Right.
Up there on Union, the home of the real police.
Yep.
So I'm going to say. And those of you who know, you know.
You know, yeah.
And then I went into the Bureau, the North Detective Bureau, where in 06, in April of 06, I was promoted as a sergeant, went back south. And then while I was south, I went into narcotics. I worked the narcotics division, and then I went to the 4th District for 30 days and went into internal affairs. I left internal affairs, I think 2011, was assigned to the 2nd District, and that's where my incident occurred. So I retired out of the 2nd District.
You touched on something there a little bit. I've never had anyone from internal affairs. How long were you down at internal affairs?
So I think I was down at internal affairs a little over 2 years, and the best advice I can tell anybody that's listening, and this is going to sound really good, is that if you know their rules, they can't with you.
Yeah.
And because I knew the rules, I had a regime in when I was shot that didn't care for me. And I was getting toyed with, for lack of a better term, on certain things, especially as my injury drug itself out. And I played the rules. And I'll give the perfect example of it. Before my shooting, I got into a little bit of an incident where a former city policeman was arrested for a stupid crime. And it made the paper. And then there was like 74 policemen in the city that ran his name within 3 days of that article breaking. Which, for those of you all know, is you cannot do that. It's illegal to do that. And so I hadn't run the guy for like 5 years prior. And so there was this scuttlebutt going down when I was in the 2nd District about all these people having to write memos about why they ran this person, right? And I'm like, oh, yeah, well, they don't have me. Like, they don't have me. So they went back 5 years, found out I ran him, and then allocated me for misuse of the computer. Not the other 74 people, but allocated me for it. And I'm like, you can't hold me to a standard that you're not holding anybody else to.
Yep.
And I will never forget, and I won't say the name, but a higher ranking officer said, hey, it's just a written reprimand, take it. No, sir.
I
said, if you give me that written reprimand, I said, I'm going to refuse to sign it, which you're going to allocate me for that. I go, then we're going to write up a Division 21 across the street, or it's Division 22. I go, we're going to write across the street, right? And then we're going to tell the judge what you're doing. And then we're going to see what's happening. And then I'm going to scold you by suing you for trying to ruin my career, for screwing with me on something that happened 5 years ago that's not relative to what's going on here. Yep. And you've got 74 other people to do this. And I'll never forget that we're doing this interview, and the ID mister goes, well, how do you know about that? I go, I was born at night. It wasn't last night or the night before, and so they basically really backed off of that.
Yeah.
And so that's like for me, when I got into internal affairs, I really learned the inner and outs of the politics of policing and how the rules they can bend to help them or they can bend to hurt somebody else. And it's great to know those rules. And so anybody that's a young sergeant or even a 20-year sergeant, you need to go into IAD and learn that rope, because it not only does it help with investigating things, but it helps show you where things are at. And I watched, there's so many stories I could tell about that, and I don't want to get into all that, but there was a lot of great people up internal affairs, and there were some people that believed that their job was to literally arrest policemen. And I think that's kind of the wrong attitude to have when you're in internal affairs. Like for me, internal affairs was, I want to find out what the truth was. And if this officer has done something wrong, then it's our job to hold him accountable.
Yeah, you're protecting the integrity of the police department.
Let's forget the police department. Let's just say policing as a profession, right? And the minute you start skewing that one way or the other, now you are becoming more of a problem than you are a fixer, because the people that get away with it will continue to push that envelope. The people that don't get away with it, that would probably make great policemen, they just need a little guidance. Now you've bittered them towards it, and now it's either they quit or they go somewhere else. And that is the downfall of, and that all came from all the Ferguson and all that stuff, came all out of that stuff. But.
When I'll share my extensive amount of brushes with the internal affairs. It's just one. It's all one event. When I had just gotten off of, like, I just reached my 1 year window. So I was literally a year and 1 week.
Nice.
And I was like, you know what? I'm doing good. I'm riding 41 all the time. So excited, right? Get a call in my area to a firehouse. 2 firefighters had gotten into a fight. And I started hearing people take themselves out on, when they saw a pop in the queue, it hadn't been dispatched yet. People taking themselves out at car stops and all this stuff. And I'm like, so I got a year on. I get a hold of the dispatcher. I'm like, hey, you can go and assign me that call. It's in my area. Sure. Just assign me a car when it's available.
Which is good for all you young policemen.
Yes, definitely do that. But be sure you know what the call is. So I get the call and I say, hey, just assign me a car when available. I said, it's at the firehouse. I don't really need an assist.
Sure.
I messed that one up pretty big time.
Well, so before you even, I don't even want to know the story. You were trying to do what any first responder would do, is trying to help somebody out of a bad situation, right?
Yeah.
And again, there's this different standard, right, that they throw at you. But at the end of the day, you're always trying to help whoever you call, go to. Is that's what I used to tell when I had young policemen, right?
Yep.
It's not about arresting somebody. It's not about finding how many warrants they have. It's not about trying to get out of a police report, because that's really good to do too. It's about understanding the problem and then trying to stop the problem from occurring again.
No, that's a very good point. And I'm a little disgruntled about the whole situation.
Sure, you should be.
So I get there, 2 firefighters had gotten into a fight.
One of them, physical altercation or a yelling altercation?
No, there was a physical element to it. And the captain and below were completely on board with letting bygones be bygones. They weren't in the same house. They were just going to go their separate ways. Well, I had a sergeant that was not my sergeant at the time show up to the call and tell me that we were going to write the report. She had gotten a call from a higher up in the fire department, and they wanted the report written as well. I said, okay, I'm okay with doing that. So I talked to one of the other officers, and he said, let's do a non-criminal incident. We're documenting it all on paper. Neither party wanted to press charges at the time. Okay. I had spoke with both of them. We're going to document it on paper. I get back to the station. My sergeant tells me that I have to charge them both with assault third and cross-charge them. So that is where that happened. Well, at some point, the there was some talk. We needed to change some stuff around, do stuff like this. Well, it kept getting changed and changed and changed. And there were some phone calls made with other sergeants to these specific firefighters. I was told what to put in the report. Knowing now what I know, you are writing the report. You are responsible for the report 100% of the time. And I just kept typing and putting everything in, what everyone's saying.
You were trying to do what you thought was right because of the guidance. So again, young officers out there, anybody wants to let you change a statement that you may or may not agree with, can you send me an email on what you want me to put?
Yeah.
Because what you're doing is, and as a good sergeant, and I'll take an example of me, is that if I ever asked my guys to do something for me, I would put it on paper.
Yeah.
And I would tell them, per the direction of Sergeant Lake, statement is being added for this reason.
Yeah.
And that's when you have a good supervisor. It's the ones that are trying to do what you're doing, is trying to make everybody happy and appease them and not necessarily get involved, and that gets you bit. And so it's hard. It is really hard to stand up to somebody.
Yeah.
And I will give you a great example for me, and I'm going to do a little storytelling. So I was the 2nd District officer, and I will not name the sergeant, but he wasn't the sharpest knife in the toolbox.
Yeah.
But he thought he knew what he was doing. And so he called me off. This was right as cell phones came in. He called me on my cell phone after 9, because it was only 1 cent a minute, and said, you need to go over here at this house, and you need to write the person a peace disturbance because they came down and banged on the neighbor's door yelling at him. So I go to this house, and I go by myself. I called out on the address, and I get there, and there's a bunch of women there, and the one gal was like, "Oh, are you the stripper?" I go, "For the right amount of money, I can be." They all started laughing. I said, "No, I'm actually here to talk to so-and-so." And then she comes over and she's like, "Hey, what's going on?" And I said, "Did you have an incident with your neighbor?" She goes, "Oh yeah, that SOB came home and is drunk and absolutely destroyed my flower bed." And I said, "Really?" She goes, "Yeah, he walked through it 20 times. He's pulled all the flowers out because he doesn't like them." So I actually do what you're supposed to do, a little investigation. And I walk downstairs and I see the flowers are damaged, right? They're damaged, 100% damaged. And I call my sergeant on Tact A. And he's like, "What do you need, Lake?" And I go, "Hey, there's a little bit more to this story that you're giving me that needs to go in here." And he said, "I don't care what happened. Write this upstairs neighbor, a summons for disturbing the peace, and don't ask any more questions."
Right.
And I said, "Sergeant, I'm not asking questions, but there's another crime here. We're not worried about that other crime." So when I was a young policeman, there was a whole other story behind it. I got in a little trouble, and I learned really quick how to protect myself. So I wrote this woman a summons, and I told her, I said, "This is not right. I don't agree with this. I will write this report accordingly, and I believe that you can get this taken care of."
Yeah.
And I completely don't agree with how this sergeant is doing this. And now was that wrong of me? Yeah, probably was wrong of me to say that. So when I wrote the report, I put, per the direction of Sergeant XYZ, I was ordered to go to this house, do A, B, and C. At the scene, I investigated, found E, D, and F, and when notified about the other potential crimes, quote, "We're not worried about other crimes," right? So the summons was issued.
Yeah.
I guess it's the little Gen 19 form or whatever. I can't remember the numbers anymore. And
PDD, yeah.
The sergeant signed the report and leveled it. And so a couple months later, Internal Affairs calls me and says, "Hey, did you do this, this, this?" And I said, "Yeah." And they go, "Well, we need you to come down and take a memo." I said, "Have you read the police report?" "Nope." I said, "You need to read the police report." Never heard another word about it. And I believe that sergeant took a day off for that. But I mean, that's the kind of thing that I think gets to be lost
Yeah.
with the generation that we have. And what I mean by that is I was under the old school regime where you tried to protect policemen by doing other things and trying to cover for them. Mm-hmm. Whereas in this generation, it's more about, I got to protect myself and don't worry about what others think about it. Mm-hmm. And I think that is it's good and bad. Mm-hmm. But I think if you're able to protect yourself, that's probably the key thing here. So I was in that transitional part,
right.
like, and that really helped me because I get what you were doing with the firemen, and I understand what you would have done. I believe the sergeant might have been a little over the head and not talking to like a lieutenant and having a powwow, like having a conversation between the three of you. And those things are really important. I had a sergeant who thought that I violated somebody's civil rights on a call. I had a guy who was kind of, he was schizophrenic. And we were in the back of an ambulance. It was cold outside, and he started fighting in the back of the ambulance. And it's me, the paramedic, and that's it. My assist hasn't arrived on the scene yet. Mm-hmm. And he's not a small fellow, and he's pretty strong. And I get an arm bar on him, and I fold his hand up, and I got him pointed towards the back of the ambulance, and I smack his head on the door, and it opens because it wasn't locked, and I threw him out of the ambulance and then jumped on him and was able to handcuff him. And he got a big gash in his head, and I wrote it the exact way it happened. And the sergeant's like, well, you can't do that. I go, what can't I do? Well, you can't use his head to open the door. I go, I had no other way of opening the door, right? Like I had no other way of doing this. And she's like, well, you have to change this. And I'm like, I ain't changing it. And then, we went back and forth, and I said, with all due respect, let's go see the lieutenant. So he walked in, and she immediately starts talking to him. And I said, Sergeant, can I interrupt you? And she's like, yeah, because I was, I believe that rank has that honor, that privilege, right? I said, can we just allow the lieutenant to read the report without asking any questions? Yeah. I think that's key. I think if young policemen can learn something is when you read a report, you don't want to have any questions. Right. You want to be able to understand the event, visualize it as you're reading it, and be able to understand what all transpired, right? And so the lieutenant reads this report, and he looks at me, he goes, what's wrong with it? I said, you'll have to ask the sergeant. And the sergeant's like, well, you can't do that. He violated civil rights by, assaulting a handcuffed prisoner is what she was calling it. And the lieutenant goes, he clearly articulates what happened. He clearly articulates what's happening. And he clearly articulates that the confined space is a bad place. There's other people. He's trying to protect the medic. He's trying to protect equipment. Like, I don't see a problem with this. And I remember her saying, well, I won't sign the report. And he says, fine, you don't have to. I will. And he signed it, and nothing ever came out of it. Right. But those are the kinds of things that you have to, as a young policeman, you got to be able to stand up for yourself, especially when there's senior people there and even rank. And if you don't agree with something, you've got to voice that and then try to find a way to make a happy remedy by allowing someone else to come in and help guide that. Absolutely. I think policemen forget that. Yeah,
I think that they... And I do think that I do see stuff like that changing. You see younger officers every day kind of standing up for, I did it a few times, but there was other times where I'm like, man, why didn't I just, stand up for myself in that situation? It was my call. It was my decision to make whether we do this or that until, I'm outranked. And then at that point, I got to have that discussion with whoever. And I totally agree with what you're saying, that the younger generation knows that it's okay to have a backbone in that kind of situation and say, hey, this is the way I did it. This is my call, and this is the way I want it to reflect.
Well, you got to remember, we're dealing with arrogant people. Yeah. Most policemen have an ego the size of Texas, right?
Very true.
I'm not saying I didn't have one, but I also knew how to check my ego at the door sometimes. Yeah. And I think other policemen don't do that. Mm-hmm. And I think that you see guys that have promoted, I have stripes on, I know what I'm doing. And I've gotten into it with other sergeants. Yeah. And it was just like, they're like, well, you don't know what you're talking about. I got 30 years on, you got 15. And I go, I don't care how many years I have on. The way you're handling this is wrong.
Yeah.
And we're not going to do it this way. And, and so that, like that, you come in with that, I've got rank because I've got more time on, or I'm the senior sergeant. Some of that stuff you got to just walk out and go, and you got to let it go. And if you don't, that makes you a bad leader. It makes you a bad supervisor. It makes you a bad policeman. And it's one thing that I will tell you. I had a girl that rode with me. We went to a house for a domestic disturbance, and there's 40 people in this house, and it's a brother fight, brother-mom fight. I don't remember what it was. It was over in the 6th District off of West Florissant. And I remember the one brother got really squirrely, and I grabbed him, and I put him in an arm bar and took him to the floor because I was going to handcuff him because he was going to have to go. Like, he was the main instigator.
Right.
And all of a sudden, the family turned to me, and they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, you all need to get back now. And my field partner, she was like, well, let's just get him outside. And I said, yeah, we'll get him outside. So I cuff him, and as I'm picking him up, they start coming at me. And I push the emergency button on my radio. And she's like, did you just hit your emergency button? I go, yeah. She goes, why'd you do that? I go, because we need a little help here. She goes, no, we don't. We got this. And we get outside, and the crowd follows us outside. Well, then all the sirens and lights are coming, and it's like a minute and a half, and then all of a sudden, we get him. Everybody's going, hey, what's going on? What's going on? And then the crowd starts dispersing. So we lock him up for general peace or whatever it was. And we're at the station, and I'll never forget. She walks into me, and she's like, you don't believe, or you don't think I can handle myself. I said, never said that. And she's like, well, just because I'm a girl doesn't mean I don't know how to fight. I go, I never said that either.
Right.
I'm going to tell you right now, I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel comfortable, and I've hit the button for that reason. If you have a different problem for that, that's your problem. It's not mine.
I don't want to fight a family.
Well, and that's the other thing is like, it's not, ask for help when you need it. Like, I think some rookie policemen feel like they've got to figure themselves out before they get help. Because what are notorious for doing, Nate? Making fun of everything. And they will relentlessly with you if they find that there's some little thing that they can get you with.
Oh, yeah.
And you got to have a really tough skin with that. And at the end of the day, if they mess with you about it, that probably means you made the right decision.
Yeah.
And they're probably happy that you did.
It's better to be safe than sorry. Yeah, I mean, because 9 times out of 10, sorry is going to be a whole lot worse than just sorry.
Well, you were injured. Yeah. I was injured. I'm sure we could talk about that and say, what would you have done different? What would have I done different? Like, there's all that could come out. Because the best part about Monday morning quarterbacking is that you're not there. You're watching the tape.
Yeah, I think, and if there's a younger officer watching, I think that the best advice that I could give, is that your decision is your decision, and you're going to have to live with that. And
amen to that.
You need to realize that and take pride in that. Honestly, I mean, if you make that decision, be 100% with it, and go to bed at night.
Yeah, right, wrong, or indifferent.
Yep.
Every call, everything you do is a learning opportunity.
Yeah.
And if you don't do, I did 20 years. I did 19 and a half years on the street. Every day I learned something.
Yeah.
I'll give you a story about my shooting that you'll actually, I find it very comical, right? So the Saturday before my shooting, I won a call with Stevie Catraba, if you're watching. Hi, Stevie. Anyway, she was getting ready to retire from the police department. She had enough.
Right.
And she was just holding on a little bit longer. And we got a call for an open door down on Macklin Avenue, not too far from the police station. And we get to this building, and we're looking at it, and we go to open, and the door's open. And I go, hey, Stevie, do you want to go in first? And she's like, no, I don't want to get shot in the face. I go, okay, I will. And I go in, and there's nobody home, but there's beer boxes and beer cans stacked floor to ceiling all through this house. Like, it was insane how many beer cans. And we laughed, we kind of laughed and we joked about it, because I said, if anybody's going to get shot in the face, it's going to be me. The very next night, around the same time that call came out, I get shot in the face. And I'll never forget that. And she freaked out. Like, she freaked out. I heard that she freaked out about it. And you know, I'm sitting here 9 years later laughing because that's the ironic part of this whole thing was like, oh my God, are you freaking kidding me right now?
Well, Sarge, for people that don't know, I know your story. We've talked about it some, but let's go ahead and talk about that.
Okay. I've been telling my story at CIT as the officer lived experience. I think it's really important. So, I'll go through it. We had just come from a house where the guy we were looking for, who was good probably for a couple homicides, we had just left his house, and I was in an agitated state. I had gotten into it with a 16-year-old girl, and I was like, you know, she's not right. And so the advice I give the policemen that I see in my class, and I'm probably most of them see, is, you know, find somebody you can talk to that doesn't talk about police work, right? Because when you get around a bunch of policemen, they all one up each other on everything.
Yeah.
So that person for me was my dad. Mm-hmm. And so I had called my dad, and I was trying to talk to him, and I was going southbound on Hampton Avenue towards Pernod, and I was distracted because I was talking to my dad. And the reason I was doing that was I was so frustrated from the call before that I wanted to discharge that anger so I didn't carry it from somewhere else, right? And I wanted a way to just kind of not be a policeman for 5 minutes in your real life, right?
Yeah.
And I had let my guard down, and the lights turned red at Pernod, and I stopped a little too close to the car in front of me. And then the guy behind me stopped close. And I remember talking myself. I told my dad, I'm like, shit. And he's like, what? I go, I'm too close to the car in front of me. He's like, back up. And I go, I can't. The guy's too close to me. And then that's in the side view mirror. That's when I catch this car coming down the suicide lane flying. Mm-hmm. And I said, what does this guy want? Like, what's this guy doing? And my dad said, what's going on? I said, hold on a minute. And I just put the phone down. And then, you know, as he pulled up, the nose of the car dived, rocked back. And then I see the butt of the pistol coming up over the back, the passenger seat. And before I even registered a gun, he had shot me right here, like literally right above the lip, between my nose and my lip. And that just jarred me backwards. And I lost all vision. I thought I was dead. I really did believe I was dead. And I'm sitting there trying to figure out what to do. And that is one of the scariest feelings as a policeman, is like, I don't know what the next move is. Mm-hmm. Because seasoned officers will tell you, rookie guys, that you have to have a plan to a plan to a plan to a plan to a plan. Mm-hmm. And you got to be able to think quickly on your feet, or it's going to be problems for you. Yeah. And so I just remember being blank and just not knowing what my next move was, and then coming to and watching him drive off eastbound on Pernod, the light turning green, and everybody driving away from me. And that is just an alone feeling that is scary. I want no one to ever have that. And I thought I was just going to die alone. I thought I was going to be there dead alone. And I didn't want to hurt anybody, so I put the car in park. And then I was afraid. I mean, that is probably one of the hardest things for me to get through with therapy, was saying that I was afraid of it. Yeah. And I still get embarrassed in front of policemen to say that I was afraid of something. And for you young guys, it's okay to be afraid. That's your body telling you, this isn't probably the smartest thing you're doing right now. Yeah. And I didn't know what to do. And a guy knocked on the window, and he said, officer, are you okay? And when I heard officer, I knew, like, I'm a policeman. I got to get help. And then I got on the radio and asked for help. And, you know, the rest is history. They ran me to the hospital, and there's all kinds of comical stuff with that. And then at the hospital, I think the big thing is after my CT was I saw my wife, and I saw how upset she was about me being hurt and scared, right? Yeah. So I did what every great policeman does. I made jokes all day long. And I did that because I was trying to take the fear from them I felt like I had given him that burden, right? Because you've been down this road. And the second thing is I was trying to fix it.
Yeah.
And for me being trapped at that car, it was my fault for my shooting. I did this to myself. I've got to get myself out of this. And so I'm going to make fun of this until I figure out what my move is to cover my ass, because I put my ass out there because I up and I was trapped.
Yeah.
And it took me 3 years to walk past that boat. And even now, to this day, I still hold the didn't finish my duty. Didn't save anybody, right? Didn't save anybody. And that if for some reason I would have been killed, that the other officers that have been killed since my shooting, that they would somehow still be here, that I would be the last one. And I know that's not true. I know that's not true, but I mean, that is just something that as an officer, I'm sure, Nate, you've got that feeling too, to some degree, that, you know, like that you can't be there, you know, when somebody gets hurt, that you can't be there to fix it and you can't be there to help them. And that is a struggle. I don't care how often it happens. It's a struggle for me 9 years later.
Yeah. No, I mean, and you get and you can probably relate, but you get the heart sinking feeling when, you know, there's just certain things in the atmosphere. I don't know what it is. I had this when I was a cop. I still have it now, but you can just feel it, like something bad's happening, you know?
Like we're due, right? It's that we're due for something. We're due. Something's due. Yeah.
It's a terrible feeling. And part of it is, you know, as police officers, we're creatures of habit. We, you know, you believe in rituals, you believe in this stuff, you know, and when that stuff doesn't go A, B, and C, you know, you wonder.
Because what if it doesn't go A, B, or C? You're either going to get in trouble, somebody's going to get hurt, or you're going to get screwed, blued, and tattooed somehow at this deal.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's walk down that path. I know we kind of talked about doing this before, but and you know, everyone's kind of different, but I feel like every story of walking away from the department, the medical, all of that, I feel like it always takes somewhat of the same path for every officer. So let's kind of talk about.
So let's talk about what happened to me afterwards. So, and I'm sure that you're going to relate to some of this. I was a hero for 6 days, and I will tell that to anybody. Yeah. I had people at my house I didn't even know. I had politicians calling. I had people, very influential people, offering me all kinds of stuff, and I'm like, I don't want it. I don't want it. I don't want it. My biggest thing, like you, was to try and figure out how was I going to get back. I got to get back, right? I got to get back. In my heart, I knew that I was never going back. But in my brain, I'm telling myself, we got to get back, and I'm going to fake it till I make it. So the one thing I decided to do after day 3 was I wasn't going to lie about anything. Like, I wasn't going to lie about what was happening to me. I wasn't going to lie about what was going on. So I have my first doctor visit at Barnes Care, and it's the Tuesday or Wednesday after my shooting, okay? And I go in, and I have a really hard time keeping my balance. If I close my eye, I feel like I'm like a drunk sailor. I'm going like this. Yeah. I've got 2 Band-Aids, one here and one here, right? And I go in, and they are like, okay, so we know you're going to lose some teeth. Well, we know that the bullet is still lodged in your head. And we got to figure out how to do that. And so I said, okay, but I can't walk. What do you mean you can't walk? And I started saying I'm staggering. I'm like a drunken sailor. So Barnes Care gives me physical therapy to learn to walk again. And I'm like, I know how to walk. Right. I just don't have any balance. Right? And they're like, no, it's traumatic. It's from the traumatic part of this thing. And I go, so the brain injuries caused me not to know how to walk? Because I'm like, I know how to walk. It's just I feel unstable. Right. You probably didn't have this, but there was a person that was an advocate for us for the Barn. I think she was through Barnes Care, and she set me up with a ear, nose, and throat doctor. And I went and saw this ear, nose, and throat guy, and I told him what was going on, and he goes, "Oh, I know exactly what's wrong with you, but I'm teaching 3 people. Do you mind?" And so I said, "No." And so we had 3 students come in, and one was like, we need to do this. They've made all these huge medical expenses that would have been just great. And the doctor's like, "No, I know exactly what's wrong with him. Let me show you something." So he hands me this piece of paper, and I go, "Do I want to know what I'm signing?" And he just, with a straight face, says, "Probably not." And I said, "All right." So I signed it. He goes, "Realistically, we're going to cut your eardrum, and we're going to suck out the fluid that's sitting behind your ear." And I go, "There's fluid back there?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "That's why you can't walk. It's like, it's like swimmer's ear. It's just a really bad case of it." And so he cut both eardrums, he sucked them out, and I think they got like this much fluid, bone fragments, fluid, shrapnel, snot, all kinds of stuff out of it. Man, the minute he set me up, I felt like I was 18 years old again. I could hear, I was walking around fine, and at that point I was like, okay, I'm going to be good. Like, I'm going to be good, right? And then I go and see this maxillofacial surgeon. And he comes in and he says, "Hey, I just want to let you know that you're never going to get over your shooting. You're just going to have to learn to live with it." I started laughing at him. And I told you policemen have arrogant egos. I had mine. I go, "Well, hey, motherfucker, you don't know me. I'm a city policeman."
Yeah.
I said, "We get over all kinds of shit."
Yep.
And he goes, "No, Tom, I think I need to tell you this story." He says, "There was a lady that worked for UPS that was driving down the street, and she got shot in the face, and she could no longer drive a UPS van or drive a car." I started laughing. I said, "Well, she wears brown, I wear blue, so we know where that's going to take it." And that's no dig anywhere, but it is a dig, right?
It is, yeah.
Right? And he goes, "I don't think you clearly understand me." And I said, "Well, Doc, I'm going to prove you wrong." And then I say, tell everybody, he's been more right to this day than ever. And so that was an eye-opener for me. And I think that was the first time that I realized that I probably was done. Like in a realistic tone from somebody that said, "Hey, you're done."
Yeah.
And so my medical wasn't bad. Meaning that, I lost a couple teeth, I had some stitches, my hearing was back to normal, so I kind of got forgotten about.
Oh, yeah.
And so we went on for a couple months, and I was having a really, really hard time adjusting. I was getting angered really easily, little things were upsetting me, I wanted to be by myself, I didn't want to talk to anybody. I think the Chris Kyle movie where he's sitting in front of the TV and just sitting there. I was doing that, but it was just me sitting somewhere or sitting in my basement or laying in my bed staring at the ceiling. Yeah. And it wasn't that I was reliving anything to some degree. It was, okay, you're not right. How are you fixing this? So I'm trying to figure out how to fix myself. And so I went into Barnes Care for a visit, and I kind of broke. So there was a doctor at Barnes Care that was notorious for putting people back to work when they shouldn't have been. And he was seeing me that day. And I was scared to death he was going to put me back to work. And so I was in the meeting, and I said, "Hey, I really need to tell you something." And he says, "Yeah, what's going on?" I go, I can't do this. I go, I'm having a really hard time emotionally trying to adjust what's happened to me. And I'm going from fits of anger to fits of depression to fits of comedy, laughing hysterically for no reason, to wanting to harm myself or harm others. Like I'm playing this gamut. And I said, "I don't want you to put me back to work." And he goes, "Well, why would you think that?" And I said, "Because you're notorious for doing it." And he goes, "Really?" Like he was surprised that I said that. And so he said, "No," he goes, I can hear it in your voice that there's something up. So what they did was they set me up with a counseling visit, and I went to the counselor, and the counselor thought I was the guy that shot and killed the guy that shot me. Okay, I don't know this. So I go in this therapist's office and we sit down and he's like, hey, are you good with your shooting? Yeah, I guess I'm good with it. And he's like, you don't have any regrets with it, do you? No, not really. Think you could have done something different? Well, I said, doesn't everybody? He's like, yeah, everybody does. But, I mean, you're not having night terrors or anything about it. Like, no. And you're okay with what happened, right? Yeah, I guess. Yeah. It's great. You know, go see this doctor, which is a psychiatrist. And so I go to the psychiatrist. We called him affectionately, Santa Claus was his name. Yeah. And I remember him coming in, and there was a rookie that was sitting in his lobby getting his psych eval. And he looked at me, and his eyes got like Texas size. Now, this is like 3 months after my shooting, and he goes, you're Sergeant Tom Lake. Oh, yep, that's me. Goes, wow. I go, and you're a brand new cadet. He's like, yeah. And I go, you sure you want to do this job? He goes, yeah. I go, are you sure you want to do this job after what happened to me? He's like, yep. And I said, okay. Well, I had to go back and take this test, psych eval test. And like I said before, I wasn't going to lie on it. So when I went through this test, I did it. And I handed the test back in. And I remember the doctor comes out and he looks at me. And he closes the door and he looks at me again. He goes, you Sergeant Lake? I go, yeah. He goes, you the guy that got shot in the face? I go, yeah. He goes, what are you doing here? And I said, well, they told me to come here. I go, I took your test, and, see if I'm up or not. Yeah. And he goes, do you have a gun on you? No, I don't have a gun on me. Are you sure? Like, yeah, I don't have a gun on me. Yeah. So he pulls me back in the office and he goes, I don't understand what you're doing here. I said, well, what do you mean? He goes, you shouldn't be here. And I said, well, I told him a story about this. He's like, oh, yeah. Yeah, I figured that out. He thought you were the guy that, and I was like, oh, he goes, you have the worst case of PTSD I've ever seen in my life. Yeah. And I go, no, I don't. He goes, yeah, you do. I said, well, I was never in the military. That's a military thing from combat. I said, I was never in combat. He goes, oh, yeah, you were. I said, no, I never served in the military. He goes, you were in combat every day. Yeah. He goes, post-traumatic stress. He goes, it's after your event and you're freaking out about it. I go, yeah. He goes, you are the classic person for this diagnosis. He goes, you, my friend, need some serious help. Yeah. And so he hooked me up with a therapist who happened to be a retired policeman from St. Louis County who I served with as a reserve officer in St. John's Police Department. And I went to his thing, and we had, it was good to see him. We talked, kind of laughed a little bit. He sat down in the chair, and he says, I just want to ask you one question. I said, what's that? He goes, do you think you can be a policeman? And then my immediate reaction was to start crying. And I cried in his office probably for 50 minutes. He said, like, hey, the session's over. Do you think you're going to be okay? I'm like, I had a guy there to drive me home. I'm like, yeah. And I went out and got in the car and drove home and slept for like 18 hours and then came back and, the second day and we did some more pleasantries. He asked me the same question again. I had the same reaction. And at that point, that's when I kind of knew that I wasn't going to be able to do this job anymore. Mm-hmm. And what he did for me was he helped me find out why I was feeling the way I was. And then he helped me understand why I was feeling the way I was. And then he helped me process it. And when I learned how to start processing what was going through my brain, it became easier for me to do. Right. And so I'm sure you're the same thing. I still carry things with me. Oh, yeah. But I know how to recognize them and eliminate myself or put myself in a different position because I know what's coming and I know what the reaction is going to be and I know how to handle it. And that is something I wish somebody would have taught me 30 years ago. Yeah. Because I think if I would have been able to understand what my PTSD was, if I could have understand how to process it, that I think somehow I could have made a comeback and still been able to hold on to the career that I loved and a way to find a way to help young officers and even seasoned officers in dealing with the events that come at them.
Yeah. No, that's great. I think that a lot of what's missing in most of us is just the ability to process any of that. I mean, even I don't have a whole lot of memory from my shooting. I still, stuff still bothers me from the shooting and stuff. But I find myself a lot of times when I go to therapy talking about other things that happened on the job. And it's eye-opening to me that I wasn't doing that and processing that stuff. It took me getting shot to process that stuff, right? And I think that that's what a lot of people don't understand about, especially in the city. You see, it's not normal to see dead bodies all the time. In the city, you see dead bodies. No matter where you're at in the city, you're going to see them several times a year.
And I think also on top of that is like policemen are really good at compartmentalizing things.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this. Policemen's sense of humor is demonic.
Yeah.
But it's demonic for a reason.
Yeah.
You're trying to separate yourself from the reality of life and not put it with your life, right?
Yep.
And then you don't want to put it with your life because you're trying to protect the ones that you love from seeing the things that you see.
Yeah.
And you don't know how to explain those to somebody.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna do this now before I forget it, but I tell officers in my CIT class that if this would have been given to me when I was a young policeman, it would have saved a lot of headache in my family from me. It would have helped me with my marriage. It would have helped me with my kids. So policemen like to hide the trauma. They like to hide the bad things that show up, right? And, when we get together, we don't talk about, I found that dead kid there behind that bush, man. That was f***ed up. We talk about like the dope guy that we get or the stupid drunk, but we don't talk about the really sad part of the job.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I've learned doing this is that I wish I would have had this conversation with my wife. I said, hey, there's going to be days that I'm going to come to you and I need you to be present for me, which means I don't want you to fix my problem. I don't want you to solve my problem.
Yeah.
I want you just to listen to what I'm dealing with and trying to understand.
Yeah.
And that if I need you to do something, I will tell you. And if I need you to help me solve the problem, I will tell you.
Right.
Other than that, I just want to tell you the problem that I have.
Yeah.
So I'm going to sit next to you. I'm going to hold your hand. I'm going to stand in front of you. I'm going to kneel in front of you. I'm going to do something, and I'm going to speak. I don't want you to interrupt me. I just want to be heard. And I'm going to say whatever I'm going to say to you. And when I'm done, I'm either going to get up and kiss you on the forehead, I'm going to kiss your hand, or I'm going to turn around and walk away.
Yeah.
And I don't want you to follow me. I don't want you to say another word to me until I bring it back up to you. And the reason why I tell you all these steps is because sometimes as a policeman, when you see what we see, you just have to say it out loud, not to hold it anymore.
Yeah.
It has to come off of that chest of yours, right?
Yeah.
And if you have someone in your life that's able to do that for you, you will be 10 times the policeman I ever was. You will be one of the greatest policemen out there because not only can you solve crimes, but you can fix yourself,
process it,
and you can process what you see, and you will not carry this with you when you leave this job.
Yeah.
And it's just more healthy.
Yeah.
I mean, when I got shot in 16, there was no help for me.
No. Yeah.
We had if you were an officer involved in a shooting where you shot somebody, they sent a team out with you. But if you were shot as an officer, they didn't send anybody.
Yeah. No, I think that's spot on. I mean, it's literally not even, when you talk about what happened on the job, it's not even, you don't even want the reaction. You just want to be able to say it. You want someone to hear. I don't even need to look at that person and watch them process it. I just need to say it and know that someone is on the other side listening.
That you're heard.
Yes.
because there's so often in this job that you feel like you're not being heard.
Yeah.
And I would tell my wife is like, she would want to fight with me when I got home. And I'm like, why do I want to fight with you? I've been fighting for 8.5 hours.
Yeah.
The last thing I want to do is come home and decide what you want for dinner. No, I'm not doing that. And I think that people, that's why I think policemen gravitate to policemen or firemen or first responders, nurses and doctors and stuff like that, is because we all see this trauma and we all work this weave together, right? And we all know that we don't want to talk about the elephant in the room, so we don't. So we just kind of ignore it from each other. And I think that it doesn't matter who you marry or what job there is. If that person is willing to listen to you and allow you to be vulnerable, like that's another great word there, is vulnerable. Because as a policeman, if you're vulnerable, people find that as a weakness and they're going to take advantage of you. And you can't be vulnerable around anybody, even your partners, right?
Yeah.
And so if you can find somebody that you can be vulnerable with, now all of a sudden you become human and your emotions are real and your feelings are valid, and now you've had a better way of processing it.
Yeah.
Right? And that is a huge thing to be able to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's one big regret, like what we're talking about here is, and I know you've already said this, but me not being able to figure that stuff out until after everything, the dust is settled, and now, I'm able to walk through it.
I'll give you a little funny part about that is I didn't figure that out till 8 years after my shooting.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And I know that there's probably still other guys out there that still, can't and haven't.
Well, you've got to have this macho attitude. Like, you have to be in control, right?
Yeah.
You've got to be able, because you got to control a situation, you got to control a car stop, you got to control a scene,
Yeah.
you got to control, you got to, as a supervisor, you got to control your men, you got to control those cars, there's so many things that you have to control that when you come home, all you want to do is control what's at home too.
Yeah.
And I think that if you find that vulnerability in your life, that you can, for lack of a better term, let your hair down and be that person. So I will say this to you, Nate, that I was a diehard romantic when I was a young kid.
Yeah.
Young meaning that before I became a policeman.
Yeah.
And then when I became a policeman, I lost all that.
Yeah.
Like, it's Valentine's Day. Yeah, happy VD, ladies. Don't give me any disease. Like, that was my joke, right? But, before I would send flowers to my wife. Man, I stopped doing all that. And then going through all this process, I realized, well, that's not the bastard I want to be. I want to be this guy over here, and that's really who I am, and that's who I've become. I've become back to the guy I was before I was a policeman. Yeah. And that's really helped me be better for my family, be better for my kids, be better for my friends, the people around me, and be more honest and open about the things that have happened or are still happening to me at this point.
No, I think that's all great, Sarge. I mean, I love to envelop mental health, and I kind of hope this was kind of the way the podcast would go. I think that there's so many people, especially guys that are watching this on different departments, that struggle with that stuff, and it's okay, to not process that stuff, but they definitely need to make the steps to be able to process that stuff.
Well, and here, the challenge is if you're not talking to someone within your first year of police work, then you need to start figuring out why that is.
Yeah.
And so often it's people worry about, if I go see a department shrink, that they're going to go back and tell the department what I did, right? I'm going to tell you this. The guy that I was seeing, one of the conditions in order to see him was I had to have them share all of the notes in my sessions with the pension board. So everything that I talked about, they were able to look at, review, and understand. And I signed that waiver because it was new territory for me, and it was new territory for the pension board, and it was just new territory that I thought that if you're honest and open about what's going on, that people can really see what's happening, right? And what I found out through that process is that I had to release that. The only thing a department shrink, therapist can tell them is, yes, they're seeing me, and yes or no, they're fit for duty. That's it. Mm-hmm. Anything more than that, they violate HIPAA, they violate all kinds of stuff, and they open themselves up to major lawsuits, and that's not a good thing.
Right. No, I think that, I mean, yeah, that's absolutely a great thing to know as well.
How about this? Did you feel any less of a person when you asked for help?
No, I actually felt like I was bettering myself. You know, I felt like I was at that time when I finally decided to seek outside help. I felt like I was stepping in the right direction. You know, it was such a big wall to get over, but then I was finally like, because you know, I had this in my mindset. Oh, you know, I'm macho. I survived everything that I survived. You know, and I've done everything, and then I finally was like, there's something. You know, there's something there, and I took that step, and it was like,
right. And for me, it humbled me.
Yeah.
I had a big ego, and I didn't need any help.
Yeah.
Until I broke.
Yeah.
And then when I asked for the help and it came in, I realized, boy, that was stupid. You should have been doing this 20 months ago, right?
Yeah.
Like that is where it was with that.
Yep. No, I mean that's great. I've got, like I mentioned before, you know, I've got a lot of younger officers that are definitely gonna hopefully eat this up and use it and implement, and I really appreciate that.
Well, if any of them reach out to you and they want to talk or something, just let me know. I'm very open about mine. I think my wife gets mad at me for it, but the reality of life is that God spared me for a reason. Still trying to figure all that out, but if I can share my story, share my experiences, and allow people to see the vulnerability that I have to be able to help them get past something, I'd get shot again. I'd do it all again just to make sure that somebody out there, we don't lose somebody.
Right.
You know, suicide was a big thing before 16, and I think with all the help that's out there right now, that you know, it's not as prevalent as it was when I was coming up as a young policeman. Like I know 4 of them during my career that did that, and you know that's really hard to do.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I still think to an extent that some of that still exists. You know, we had one in the 6th district. I think it was the end of last year.
It does, and the big thing is that it's like, I'm going to do this, so look at the camera and just say, hey, look, somebody really does care about you. Like somebody is genuinely concerned about it. And if you don't believe that anybody is there, come see me or see Nate. We will look you dead in the eye and we'll tell you that we care about you and that we want to know what's going on and that we may or may not be able to fix your problem, but we're willing to listen to your problem.
Absolutely.
And that, I think, that's where people get that mentality. So for me, I 6 times for me. Like 6 times I was going to pull that trigger because I thought that was going to be the answer for me to walk away from the bullshit that I was doing. But I had kids. I mean, even if you don't have kids, but the kids were a strong part. But even for me is like, I even thought about, well, you're taking away your survival from those people that probably need it the most. You're taking away your experience from those that probably could benefit the most from it. You're being selfish and not being able to share what you know without somebody else, with the other people that may or may not need that. So guys like you were injured after me. I got call from your sergeant to reach out to you, and I did, and you stonewalled the out of me.
Yeah.
And I tried, and I said to you, when you're ready, come get me. And I did that. I remember talking to you and I were talking to Nate at the same time. I talked to both of you guys. Yeah. And you did exactly what you're doing right now. You shook your head. You're like, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, Sarge. Yes, sir. And I was not hitting that wall. You were still at your wall. You hadn't climbed it yet. And I knew it.
Yeah.
And so it's humbling for me to sit here in this podcast with you and watch how much you've grown and see what you've done with it. It is just, thank you.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you being there. I mean, you being who you are and willing to pick up the phone and call someone and call a younger officer that you knew was going through the same path that you've already walked. And I try to aspire to be that for other officers
You're doing
as well.
great.
And I think that it's the only way that younger officers, and I hate to be this way, but there's going to be officers after us that face it. Yeah. There already has been. And it prides me to know that there's going to be people like you and me that step in and say, hey, we've done it. We've been there. We've walked the path. We know where the path leads. Meet us here, you know.
Yeah, so. It's like going on a hike in a mountain. There's 20 paths, but we all wind up at the same spot.
Yep.
You know, your path may be a little different than the one we had, but we're telling you this is what's coming up on the path. So we're all going to go through the same muck. Yep. We just got to figure out how we're going to get there.
Yep. No, I think this is it's a great spot to end.
Awesome.
Perfect. Sarge, I appreciate you coming on.
Nate, thanks, man. Anytime.
Yeah, it was great. I think that a lot of the younger officers will get a lot from this. So
good.
Yeah.
If they have any questions, we'll come back and answer them for
your
you.
way.
Thanks, buddy.
Thank you.